Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. Now, tonight we have Jabu Zwane, who is a mindset development specialist, who is joining us with a unique perspective on the roles of fathers in our lives. As we celebrate Father's Day on Sunday, Jabu will share his insights on the importance of strong paternal figures and the impact that they can have on our development and how we can continue to honor and learn from these influential men. Thank you so much for joining us on Prime Live, Jabu, and welcome.
Good evening, good evening. Thank you so much, Aisha, for having me.
You are welcome. Please take over.
All right, good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much, and welcome to Monday Motivation. And we're just talking about fatherhood this evening. For those of you that may not know, I actually am a father of five children, actually. Five children, why I don't know why I'm saying four. And I believe that fatherhood is so important. And fatherhood is important because without fathers, we know what the statistics say, that literally girls are vulnerable to all sorts of harms. They are vulnerable to being abused sexually. They don't get to have the best opportunities as far as succeeding economically. They also don't have, they're more likely to be pregnant while they're still in their teen years. And then, of course, when we're looking at boys, we see that boys are more likely to go to jail if there is no father around. They're more likely to commit crime. They're more likely to also not complete high school. They're more likely to have issues, especially around responsibility, accountability, and success in general. And we know that in South Africa, actually, the statistics are telling us that up to 2/3 of South African households do not have fathers present, especially in your previously disadvantaged communities, where predominantly black and colored people are staying. There are a lot of absent fathers. And of course, along with the absence of fatherhood, there are also many psychosocial conditions and challenges with that. It is, as we've already explained. But I don't really want to make this about something that is gloomy, but I want to think about it specifically around what is the importance of being a father in a world that we have today, especially in the world that I'm talking about. It is such a a personal conversation tonight, because I myself grew up without a father. And I'll tell you this, one of the struggles that I've had was the struggles of identity, not knowing who I am. And that obviously contributed a lot to a lack of confidence. And so the presence of a father in a child's life, and I also quoted in statistics, is that fathers are able to build children's confidence. And one of the ways that children then get to build that confidence, it is through, of course, knowing who you are, but also because fathers, especially when the father is present in a child's life, they normally help with chores, with duty, with responsibility, and that helps with building the child's esteem, and that obviously then helps with building the child's identity. Without identity, we tend to be quite lost, and we tend to not have a purpose, we tend to not have a vision, and the presence of a father in one's life helps a lot with that. The second thing that the presence of a father helps is, of course, with safety. Safety against those vulnerabilities that we already explained. That I was watching a documentary the other day. It was actually a podcast. It was a podcast where a gentleman that was being interviewed with a psychiatrist was explaining the interview that they had with these men that used to attack, that were serial rapists actually. And then they were asking him, how do you identify who to attack? And then he mentioned the fact that normally when it comes to young girls and young boys, they normally would look at families where there is no father around. So the very mere presence of a father in a home helps tremendously with ensuring that children are safe. I personally know of a situation of someone that was very close to me, that was a bit younger than me, being exposed and being a victim of that kind of attack. And that was because there was no male figure, there was no father around to protect this poor girl and also other girls around in that particular area. And then the other thing that helps a lot is in terms of the economy. The research tells us that the presence of a father in a child's life, and especially in a family, helps a lot with economics. And that the economy, of course, then helps with ensuring that the children get good education, they get good health care, they also get become well provided for, which then, of course, in turn then helps with, securing the future of the child. And this is partly one of the reasons why we see that in areas where there aren't as many fathers around, they tend to also not do well economically, because then the single mothers have to be carrying a lot of the weight, and this is something that we together as a community and as a country, we've got to tackle, because quite a lot of it has to do is a legacy issue. It has to do with what the previous government did by ensuring that especially economically viable places were too far away from the homes and being too far away from the family, especially from the previously disadvantaged families, that we sort of gotten used to a culture where fathers are not present. And I'm realizing that one of the missions that as communities that we've got to do is to make it a normal occurrence that fathers are present in children's lives, especially in those places where traditionally you would grow up without seeing a lot of fathers being around. And sadly, this is a similar type of setup as well when you look at a country like the United States, where similarly, especially in the African American communities, it was also a similar type of setup. But without so much playing victim and then also concentrating too much on the past, I do realize also there's a mindset shift that needs to happen. That needs to happen to us as fathers as well, because sometimes you think that because I was not around and here I am, I'm older, I'm sort of doing okay, so then maybe I don't have to necessarily be around, and my child will also be okay. But if we are to be honest, we'd have to ask ourselves, what are some of the challenges that we personally have had having grown up without the strong presence of fathers? And one of the other challenges that I see, especially a lot with children that don't have fathers present, is the stress, become easily anxious, and also because of a lack of confidence, also they've got poor communication skills. And with poor communication skills also then comes poor emotional regulation. With poor emotional regulation also then comes the potential of violent behavior, because we can imagine if a child is unable to express how they're feeling, to explain and to self-regulate through language, the emotional struggles, then they tend to potentially explode. And in the explosion, then that may result into some kind of a violent act. And we have an upcoming, my team and I actually have an upcoming event where we will be hosting men and their sons. It's called Men of Change. And one of the activities that we're doing there is the activities around communication. And communication with the objective, for example, to build a bond and a connection between the fathers and their sons. Because that is one of the other challenges, is that when a young boy does not have a very strong connection with their father, then they tend to have that poor self-esteem and that poor communication. And one of the researches that I saw the other day when I was doing this said that, especially in the United States, a lot of the young boys who are detained as juveniles, who are teenagers who are arrested because of criminal behavior, 2/3 of them had poor linguistic development. 2/3 of them had poor linguistic development. And linguistic development is crucial again for emotional regulation. And the likelihood is that if a young boy struggles with communication, then they're going to have some kind of social challenges. And with those social challenges, they want to have issues with relationships. And with those relationship issues, then their likelihood is that they're going to isolate. And in isolating, then the likelihood is that they're going to become lonely. And in their loneliness, and we know, that increases the chance of depression. That increases the chance of anxiety. That increases the chance of unhappiness and mental challenges that comes along with that factor. And so if you are listening tonight and you're a father, I would like for you to consider and ask yourself a couple of questions. When it comes to spending time with my children, how meaningful is that time? When I'm with them, am I on my phone, not connecting with them? How well do I know my children? And if my children were to be in trouble, are they safe to come to me, to come and talk to me about their struggles? And I'm asking this question because I want you to imagine for a second, if you are not a safe person for a child to come and talk to you about some of their struggles and their challenges, then where they're supposed to go. If they decide to go and ask someone else because they couldn't come to you, how safe are they going to that person? Is it not true that if we don't create those safe spaces, those psychologically safe spaces for our children, that they are likely then to go to people where they potentially will be vulnerable to all sorts of harms that exist out there, especially in today's times where we know there are a lot of bad people out there. And I think it's one of those questions that we constantly have to ask ourselves as parents and especially as fathers, that do we create safe spaces for our children to come to us in their time of need? Let's say if they're being bullied at school, or let's say if they are experiencing some kind of trouble with their developmental stages, can they come to us for advice? And if you're finding yourself struggling to answer these questions, and or at least not being able to answer yes to a lot of these questions, then it is time for you to deeply reflect about the type of father that you are being and whether your presence in your child's life actually helps them with their development. Because we know that the critical stage where especially a child needs their father is those teen years where they learn and they test out who they are, they test out their becoming, and that your presence and your guidance as a father at that time is crucial, especially with boys. And if you're not involved in any way, you're not guiding in any way, they will always they'll go somewhere else to go find that guidance. Because until they reach that stage of adulthood, they are dependent on you as an approved source of influence to give them guidance, to give them leadership, to give them protection, to help them with building their confidence, to build their identity, to build their character, to build their consistency and disciplines in their lives, to become more accountable and more responsible. And if you find that your son, for example, or your child, for example, is struggling with their chores and with their schoolwork, and a big part of the question has to be asking yourself whether or not you are involved meaningfully in their lives. And I'll quickly then wrap it up in saying, in our relationship with our children, there are four crucial components that we got to think about. The first one, of course, is that of counselorship. And counseling is that, as much as we are parents, we also have to really have that teaching and mentoring role where we become a credible and a reliable source of information and guidance and leadership in our children's life. And it's also important that we take time to probe and find out more about our children so that we can be best positioned to guide them, to lead them, and to give them advice. The second one is that of companionship, that as our children are going through their lives, their lives, that they would know that in us, they may not necessarily have so much of a friend, but they've got a companion. They have somebody that can be there for them. They have somebody that has their back. They have somebody that loves them beyond just providing food, shelter, education, medicine, and all of those basic needs according to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But they also do have a human being that cares deeply for their well-being beyond those basic needs. And one of the ways that we provide that in a companionship is to listen, is to provide an ear to listen. And in understanding, in listening, then we get to know them for exactly for who they are, and we get to figure out exactly where we come in. And then the second, the third component of that is being a confidant and to be able to provide that safe place for them to tell you their deepest fears and their deepest secrets. And then the last thing that I would say that's very, very important is that you become their champion. You become somebody that encourages them, that motivates them, that inspires them, that helps them to go forward in life far beyond just providing the basic needs. It's great to have the privilege to be a father. And I hope that as you navigate this very complex human experience, that you equip yourself, you become self-aware, and that you really get to get opportunity to build strong, close connections with your children for their future and for the future of our nation. My name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was very helpful to you. Enjoy the rest of your programming. Good evening.